Hello and welcome to today's webinar, NTARC's Major Incident Investigation Report for 2025. It's great to have you all here. So before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that Monash University Action Research Centre recognises that we are located and conduct business on the unceded lands of the people of the Kulin Nation, and we pay our respects to their elders past and present. So, the National Transport Accident Research Centre, for those who haven't come across it, or NTARC as it's commonly known, is a partnership between NTI, Australia's largest heavy vehicle insurer, the National Road Safety Partnership Program, and Monash University's Accident Research Centre. And huge call out to NTI for taking such a leadership position in setting this up and working with us on doing this. It's a great example of corporate safety leadership. So, over to who I am. Those of you who don't know me, that's me. I'm Jerome Karslake. I'm Director of the National Road Safety Partnership Program and its many activities, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's NTARC webinar. To find out more about us, please check out our website, register for our newsletter, or even better, follow us on our social media, such as our LinkedIn page. Now, before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the NRSP core funders, and without them, it'd be impossible for us to deliver and to do what NRSP does. So our core funders are the major states and the ACT government, and they enable us to produce all the resources. So huge thanks to them and their continued support. Now, over to today's webinar. It's going to go for approximately 60 minutes, which will include 40 minutes for presentations and 20 minutes for discussion. We have a couple of pause points as we go along, so please take advantage to throw a few questions in. I have a few pre-prepared, which we'll throw out if we have not heard from you. So, as I mentioned, we want to make this as interactive as possible. Please send your questions through by typing them into the question box as shown here. That way we actually have a bit of a record for them and we can sort of make sure we tick them all off as we go through. The chat box is also open. I've thrown some comments in there. Now, diving into our presenters for today. Welcome, Jazz.
Hi, everybody.
So a bit about Jazz. Other than being awesome, Jazz is a researcher, engineer, and data scientist with a PhD in biomechatronics, engineering, and machine learning. Jasmine has completed a research fellowship in wearable assistant technologies for falls prevention in older adults and joined MUAC in 2024 as part of the NRSP team to deliver NTARC's heavy vehicle incident reports. And this is your second one, so great to have you on board, Jazz.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, Adam.
Good morning, Jerome. Well, morning for me. I should flag I'm in Queensland, so it's yeah.
Well, and we've just tipped over to afternoon, so good afternoon to you, mate. And I love this description of Adam. I think it says everything. Adam is described as the king of Australia's truck geeks. Doesn't get better than that. He began his career as a specialist heavy vehicle consulting engineer, including projects for major truck manufacturers, mining, oil and gas companies, and then went on to lead the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator's roadworthiness program and finally landed as the custodian of NTI's widely cited NTARC research into the heavy vehicle road safety. Adam is passionate on empowering industry with relevant insights to support improved safety and spends his days working with government, industry, regulators to support good safety practices and policy. And we've been super lucky to have Adam seconded across the NRSP as part of the NTARC partnership, which is really, as I think he loves to point out, he has a job which he loves that gives him the ability to do what he wants and to help him be the best truck geek we can have. Over to you guys.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for that very warm introduction. Jerome actually gave a slightly softer version. I maintain that I'm the luckiest bugger in the entire transport industry. That is how I describe this role. Why are we here? Why do we do this? We, NTI, and I personally believe we have the best road transport industry in the world. I said recently to the Federation Internationale Automobile, some representatives from Paris and Switzerland, that I would argue that in any forum they would care to provide. However, on the reverse side of that coin, Safe Work Australia data shows that working in road transport is reliably amongst the most dangerous, if not the most dangerous occupation in Australia. And it aligns beautifully with the NRSPP's remit around workplace road safety, in that everyone should be able to come home from work safe every day. And unfortunately, for 60-something truck drivers killed in workplace incidents every year, that's not the case. This data lets us draw on a really rich data source to understand the shape of that harm. And if you can't measure it and you don't understand the problem, it's very hard to manage it.
So first and foremost, the purpose of this report is not about the allocation of blame. We're here to provide an understanding, acknowledge and proactively improve on the key hazards that we find within this report so that we can create a safer heavy vehicle sector. And we want to do this through highlighting opportunities and initiating actions to reduce fatalities and serious actions. We want to identify opportunities and implement measures to reduce the overall risk in the heavy vehicle sector. We want to inform and influence government, regulators, industry, safety bodies and suppliers to play an active role in improving the safe performance of the heavy vehicle sector. And we want to share the performance with industry, other road users and the wider community.
So we'll start off with a bit of a top level view. What do the overall figures say? What are a few of the topics that come out and findings that come out there? And then we'll start to drill down further into the individual topics, exploring those individual subjects as we get deeper into the data.
So the data for this report is from 2019 to the calendar year 2024, and it has at least one heavy vehicle involved and with a GVM over 4.5 tonne. So, and it's insured by NTI, and the incident cost is equal to or greater than $50,000.
So the first of the key findings, and this goes to therefore the focus of how we might operationalize the findings from this report, is that human factors incidents where the immediate proximate cause, and I'll talk on that a little bit later, of the incident was something inside the control or adjacent to the driver of the truck. So the last opportunity to either act to prevent the incident or the last action that was the immediate proximate cause of the event was a human in nature inside the control of that driver. Now, it's really important, and I'll reemphasize this again in a moment, that just because we talk in this report, and what property insurance data deals in is immediate proximate cause, that's the data we're working with here, almost universally, the strategies, the initiatives, the response we need to put in place in response to this data will need to be broader and more holistic. It is exceptionally unusual for any of these events to be intentional. No one sets out to crash their truck in their workplace. This is simply describing the mechanism more. Don't think about it again, as Joe says, it's not fault. It's just about saying what was the flow of causation in this space, and this only goes back that one step. We need to think about that safety 2.0 view, that the actions must have seemed reasonable to the person at the time. So the changes we need to make are about shifting what is the environment around that person to better support and better protect them.
So in 2024, there were 1,767 major claims above that $50,000 threshold. And this is slightly up from 2023 that had 1,634. The total number of included claims in this data set that we analysed was 7,817. So that's from 2019 to 2024, averaging 1,039 claims per year over that period. So firstly, having a little bit of a closer look at those claims rates. So this figure here is inflation corrected claims rates. The dark green line at the top is uncorrected. So that's just the raw rates over the time series. The light green dotted line is that rate corrected for inflation. So the $50,000 threshold was set in 2003. And in 2024, that was up to $88,000. In 2024. In 2023, it was 85,000, and in 2022, it was 80.5. So looking at that uncorrected rate and the corrected rate, you can see this dip in COVID during the COVID period, so 2020 to 2021. This was due to significant changes in road usage, particularly light vehicle drivers not being on the road, so reduced traffic and therefore reduced exposure between the truck and car crashes. Looking at the uncorrected rate, in 2023, it was 129.9 incidents per 10,000 insured vehicles, and that was up to 140.1 incidents per 10,000 vehicles in 2024. When you apply the inflation corrected threshold, it's a much more moderate increase. So in 2023, the rate was 68.4, and up to 70.1 in 2024, which is only a 2.5% increase in that incident frequency. Some top level figures here as well. So this is the rate of fatal crashes between heavy vehicles and cars specifically. And the principal cause with the highest rate here is not at fault. And these are incidents where the insured heavy vehicle driver was not found to have contributed to the cause of the crash. When we look at the DCA code, so these are the definition of coding accidents. We use the Victorian coding, which is also used in Tasmania and South Australia. The highest fatal crash rate was attributed to vehicles from opposing directions with a rate of 1.43 per 10,000 trucks. Also of note, in these fatal crashes between heavy vehicles and cars were inadequate following distance, inappropriate and speed and inattention distractions. These also happen to be our top 3 human factors causes that we found in the data set. This figure looks specifically at the rate of heavy vehicle occupant fatality, so heavy vehicle drivers. Of note, the highest rate is attributed to fatigue with a rate of 0.32 per 10,000 trucks. Also in this, we found there was that you would attribute to inappropriate speed and medical events. And this is the importance of addressing driver fatigue and health-related risks, so highlights that. And we want to promote education and technology for appropriate speed selection management. The DCA codes that were attributed to fatal heavy vehicle occupant crashes were off-path on straight and off-path on curve.
Right, now looking at principles, this is where we start to drill down further into the structure. Again, I want to unpack here again the challenges of both the data structure and approximate cause. For a start, we assign a single proximate cause. We say that crash was caused by X. We have put into a single category when everyone in this webinar would recognize that we live in a multifactorial world. There will be a number of elements coming into play. We are essentially seeking to identify the largest contributor, and then it falls into that one bucket. But that means if you've got the same 2 factors occurring at 59%, so 51% and 49% for every crash, you might miss that secondary factor. And that's just a limitation of the data structure and just needs to be recognized and called out. And again, that limitation of immediate proximate cause. You will not stop fatigue crashes by telling people not to fall asleep. They are already sufficiently motivated to try to stay awake. You need to address issues, as Joe said, around underlying health conditions, the empowerment to feel able to stop regardless of what the schedule is, and the capacity to do so. That provision of rest areas and suitable bunks. It's more than just an immediate proximate cause.
Awesome.
So when we look at the top 3, and these are all human factors sub-causes, inattention and distraction, inadequate following distance, and inappropriate speed, make up 3 out of every 5 of the crashes in the 2024 data, more than all other causes. Interesting, they're not the biggest 4 though. Not at fault is actually second between inattention and distraction, inadequate following distance, and is increasing over time, as Jazz will explore.
So we can have a bit closer look at that. So what we see here is those top level principal causes, a time series trends for each of those between 2019 and 2024. You can see in 2024, human factors represented 58.6% of all incidents. We saw a 2.6% increase in human factors in 2024 with a rate of 82.02 per 10,000 trucks, compared to in 2023, where it was 80. Not at fault incidents also increased in 2024, up 26.1%. Vehicles rolling while tipping increased by 13.9%. And interestingly, theft claims doubled compared to 2023, increasing 98.9%, with most principal causes trending upwards, with the exception of mechanical failure and natural peril. So taking a closer look at those human factors, as they represent such a large portion of the data set. Here Inattention distraction being the standout, it represents 30.5% of all human factors incidents. However, it has plateaued from a sharp increase it saw between 2022 and 2023. And it even this year saw a 1.6% decrease, going from 25.4 per 10,000 trucks in 2023 down to 25. Some other human factors causes of note that had decreases where inappropriate speed was down 7.6%, inappropriate vehicle positioning was down 16.6%, and fatigue was down 23.7%. Fatigue in our data set being sleep driving. Some that saw some increases were inadequate following distance was up 8.4%, and failure to give way had a large jump of 61.2%. So we just want to take some questions about what we discussed already in the middle. So if anyone has any questions, please pop them in the chat.
We do indeed. We have some questions in the chat and the question box as well, which is great. So first one I'll do is just from Julio. He's just sort of asking, this may be in the report, but how was the fatigue defined as being a contributing factor? Self-report by driver, or how do you go about and actually land on what fatigue is?
That's a good one.
Yeah, really fantastic question. It's that good that I promise it's not a Dorothy Dixer, but it feels like it might be. So we undertake a desktop review of all of the incidents inside of the data set. We review through both all of the material received through the insurance process, and that will include things like driver's version of events, third-party witness statements, dash camera footage, photographs from the scene of incident from the towies and from the insured. I think other data sources like driver monitoring systems like Guardian from Seeing Machines, that sort of piece, police reports, at times coroner's reports, public domain information like news reports and social media posts, and then review all of that, the totality of the information we have for that event. Some are exceptionally rich. Some, particularly at the lower end of the cost band, you'll have less information and then have an assessment criteria that puts it into those data structures. Again, noting the limitations of those data structures, such as being single cause in a multi-causal world. We will not automatically take the version of events from the driver. They're certainly considered and weighed up against the rest of evidence, particularly the physical evidence. There are times where the driver's version of events is not accurate, but I don't believe they're intentionally misleading. One that sticks in my mind was a fatigue crash in South Australia, where the driver said that they felt a bang and then the truck went off the road. Interestingly, I spoke to the towie that did the recovery job there. He had really good scene of incident photos. He was also the repairer that got the job of pulling down the steering box to try to find any potential steering failure, and there was none. My belief on it is the driver has woken up. At the last moment, the driver has fallen asleep and disappeared off the road. They've woken up with the bang as the truck has landed off the 8-foot embankment where the road is built above the floodplain. And the bang they heard was not a steering failure resulting on the crash. The bang was the crash itself, but the human brain only has that one lens to view the world, and it has assembled a narrative that tried to fit the physical evidence it could see. It's just that wasn't the real story there. And again, the physical evidence of the crash scene showed that the truck has reasonably gently veered off the road and launched into the floodplain. So we will consider, but at the end, we have no qualms whatsoever at looking at the version of events given and saying that is either incorrect or at times intentionally misleading. And look, we have problems in the absence of no fault investigations in road transport. If you tell the truth, you might open yourself up to prosecution. So this is one challenge in this space where all other transport modes get the benefit of no fault investigation, but road transport does not. It's a really great question.
I'll take two more. There's a lot of questions pouring in, so I guess it depends how fast we can answer them and get through them, which is great. We'll take two more, and then we'll move on, and we will get through them as many as we can as well. So Simon just asked here: is the corrected 2.5% increase of claims outside the COVID years seen as on trend?
I mean, I think yes. I mean, that is what we are observing out there in the real world, and I've not seen anything that suggests that there's any data anomaly on this. It reflects both a worsening of general road safety data. You look at the road toll post-COVID after 60 years of near continuous improvement in Australia's road toll. It's now trending upwards and at an accelerating rate. On that note, the heavy vehicle portion of that has plateaued. It's not worsening, but it's not getting better as it had been prior to COVID. Interestingly, if you extend the data back pre-COVID corrected for inflation, we had been seeing a slow improvement over time, so a decrease in incident frequency corrected for inflation, but post-COVID that has reversed, I think reflecting that more challenging road safety environment generally.
Yeah. It is moderating though. It's not as it was.
Yes, very good to say. It would appear that unlike the light vehicle or the non-heavy vehicle involved road toll, which is increasing almost exponentially, that what we're seeing in this claims data is an increase, but at a slowing rate.
Yeah.
Two questions, two people asking a very similar question. What are some of the other elements under the other category of the most common human factors? And why is there such a rise in this year's data?
Hitting bridges was in that other category because it was a low count of how much it happened, but that actually was a one that was risen slightly this year. I think Adam could talk more to the specifics of it, but there were a few of these really small categories that got put together into the other. So it sort of like artificially inflates it if they're one of them kind of has an increase in rate.
Just before we move on, I think this is a good overall question. How applicable is the NTI data to the total fleet?
Yeah, really fantastic. Like it's a dream sample size by research standards, in that we've got about 40% of the articulated powered unit space, so prime movers, and in the mid to high teens for rigid truck. And like that's a brilliant. It's a tough one at a, I don't know, professional pride level. NTI would love to believe that it ensures, John West style, the best trucks on the road, etc. And so there potentially could be a skewing factor as a result of that. There are, accounts that would be declined, but at a 40% and mid-teens across articulated and rigid, geez, it's a pretty representative sample. Unless you think that there is a dramatic, polar split of the transport industry, a sample that big is, what every researcher dreams of.
Yeah, as a researcher, it's a pretty good a representation of population, but fully acknowledging that there'd be sampling bias in it, due to it being an insurance data set, and it does. There are some blind spots that we acknowledge, limitations as well. So that's all within the report. But yeah, and the fact that we're sort of comparing this like for like sample across years as well means we're getting a pretty good view of those national trends.
Let's keep on moving along and hear more about the data we just spoke about.
Now we're going to look at inattention and distraction. We had a couple of good definitions questions in the chat as well, so this is a pretty nice chance to explore that. So what we're talking about here is loss of task focus. And we group two forms of loss of task focus together, really two of the three. And that being inattention, a generalized loss of task focus. So you've drifted away from being attentive to driving the truck, your primary role, versus distraction, which is a specific loss of task focus. So your attention has been taken by something else. That could be in-cab technology, that could be mobile devices, that could be a billboard outside of the truck. Because of what we will and will not reliably get through the insurance claims process, we bundle these two together because it would just be too challenging to reliably separate them apart. And that brings us our largest and thankfully this year slightly declining or stabilizing of our human factors causes and the largest cause of all incidents within the data set. This is a key topic and one that I personally don't think we are yet as an industry or as a society, because I don't think this is unique to heavy vehicle space, adequately on top of.
So here we have the time series of inattention distraction incidents rates by year. And you can see there was an upward trend that has moderated in 2024 and actually even slightly declined, but it still remains the single largest contributor to incidents within this data set. So that slight decline was down 1.6%, and this is especially notable given we had that really sharp increase between 2022 and 2023, which may indicate early signs of progress in addressing inattention distraction. Inattention distraction is predominantly a single vehicle event, with 2/3, so 66.7% of all inattention distraction incidents being single vehicle. The DCA code most representative for these is off path on straight with 32.7% and a rate of 8.2 per 10,000 trucks. The next highest DCA code was off path on curb with 5.9 and on path with 5.1. And these DCA codes are indicative of single vehicle event. And these three categories accounted for 77.2% of all inattention distraction incidents. Inattention distraction is, as Adam said, very multifactorial, and it may be influenced by the level of environmental complexity and stimulus within different areas of operation. And this is noted as there is an underrepresentation of inattention distraction incidents in major cities compared to the overall figure. However, outer regional areas are overrepresented, accounting for 26.3% of inattention distraction incidents, despite comprising of 18.4% of all incidents. Certain regional environments may be more susceptible to inattention distraction related risks, potentially due to longer travel distances, reduced visual stimulus, or even a bit of complacency in less trafficked areas. But as Adam said, this really is an all road users issue. It's not specific to the heavy vehicle sector. As factors that affect your attention are your ability to self-regulate, age, gender, personality, mental health, social attitudes. And these kind of incidents are really about understanding the importance of attention towards that primary task of driving and not getting distracted by secondary tasks such as mobile phones and wearables use, consuming food and drink, talking with passengers or on hands-free, viewing our infotainment system, or even looking at roadside advertising. So we can take a couple of questions about this one.
No shortage of questions coming in, which is fantastic. What I'll do, one back just a bit earlier by John, what about medications? Where does that land?
In as far as what it would be classified as?
Where would medications be classified?
Well, medications wouldn't specifically cause sort of a crash, but if it was a medical event, so a result of taking a prescribed medication, so there is a medical event classification. We don't capture sort of post-crash toxicology though inside this data set, if that's what they're asking.
That's good. Thanks for that, Jazz. How do you define the difference between following too closely and driver distraction in attention crashes?
Really excellent question, and we'll touch on it a little bit when we get to the inadequate following distance next. I don't want to take too much of that. There's a few different types of those ran into rear crash mechanism. The first one I'll describe is the relatively low speed differential. Traffic slows, the truck just doesn't slow as quickly as the car in front of it, and you might still have a 5-car pileup. It's not a good event, but I'll separate that out to the failure to detect that traffic has stopped comprehending. This might have a larger following distance, but the truck piles into the back of it at a 60, 70 kilometre-hour speed differential, and often with catastrophic and very traumatic consequences. Essentially, it will be ultimately a call of putting things into a single factor bucket, but where the driver still had task focus, that is, they were making a choice to be at that following distance, that then is falling across into inadequate following distance. If the position is that the change in distance and the resulting ran into rear type crash was because they were disengaged, that is, they're on their phone or some other form of task distraction, A, you most normally see higher speed differentials. B, we'll often see this through the inwards-facing dash camera footage where available, even infer it from the outwards-facing dash camera footage in the shape of the crash, a failure to respond, even though traffic is very visibly slowing in front. Again, it still comes back to the limitation of a single-factor data set in a multifactorial world, but that's the sort of guidance in that space. If you've got a vehicle that is in control and responds in a timely manner to the vehicle slowing in front, but simply hasn't allowed itself the stopping distance to not run into the rear of that traffic when it slows sharply, that's going into inadequate following distance. If, on the other hand, the traffic slows and there could have been the opportunity to stop, but the driver's failure to respond is what's causing the crash, then that's in the inattention and distraction single factor cause. Again, noting the challenge of that single factorial world. Hope that answers that question.
I like the idea that Alexandra's thrown up here. Given the significant contribution of inattentive distraction to crashes, but the different causative factors, e.g. Fatigue towards inattention, in-cab technology towards distraction, do you think it's worth separating them for future analysis, if it's even doable?
I think the challenge there would be the practicability. Realistically, I think in that space, you could almost have to have a separate second data set where you only those incidents where you had inwards facing dash camera footage. That would be interesting. Of course, then you have another set of skewing factors of do trucks with inwards facing dash camera footage represent a representative sample of the broader population, or are they the more proactive fleets? And do drivers behave differently? All of those sorts of questions that researchers love to make the world a little bit more difficult. Although interestingly, naturalistic driving studies where they do exactly that, put cameras in to see how you behave while you're driving, show that people return to their bad and often illegal habits amazingly quickly, even when they are aware that they're being filmed, which I find fascinating.
I like it. Renaud sort of draws on this a little bit further. Do we believe that the increase in inattention distraction will be due to the improvement of technology to track, trace, and identify this as the cause, or would it be more aligned to other behaviours and lifestyles, etc.?
The inattention distraction classification isn't solely classified based on sort of like in truck technology, sort of capturing it. I would attribute the increases to the increase in, I think you can see sort of this introduction of smartphones directly kind of influencing the number of inattention distraction incidents across both light and heavy vehicle fleets. So as we were saying, it's not like a heavy vehicle specific crash type. It's very, very common also in the light vehicles. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it does. I think my view, we still haven't achieved the social stigmatization of technology-based distraction while driving in the way that we have achieved with drink driving. And that really needs, in my view, to be a key road safety goal. And that's not about heavy vehicles, that's across all road users. Yeah. Truck drivers are just members of the general population who happen to also drive trucks.
Yeah, I think as we do more research, we get a better understanding of the inattention distraction type crashes. Really interesting research out of the UK shows that talking hands-free is just as distracting as holding your phone. And I think that's not something that, the general population is aware of, just how distracting just changing that mechanism can be. So yeah, I think we're still studying.
We'll flow with everyone as well. If an idea pops up as you go through, we can empower or draw in interns or other things and do little side research projects as well. We're always open to these brain bubbles as we go along. So let's dive on in and keep on going, guys. We've got other questions to add in the next ones.
Inadequate following, we've had some really fantastic questions. And again, for me, the greatest value out of these sessions is in the audience interactions. We are in this data every day. It's the outside questions that really drive the best insights. So inadequate following distance. This is overwhelmingly around ran into rear crashes. It's somewhat linked to the structure. What this mostly looks like is traffic is traveling along. Might be in a metropolitan or a major city's freeway. Traffic's at saturation, traffic suddenly slows. The truck cannot stop in time, runs into the back of the car, most commonly car in front of it, and pushes that often into the car in front of it and the car in front of it and car in front of it. And as an industry, all of a sudden we are the opening news story because the Monash or the Great Western or some other major highway was gridlocked for 4 hours while the mess was sorted out. And it made up about 10%, 9.2, sorry, 1 in 10, fair enough, 1 in 11. There you go, Jazz. But she's very, very careful on this, of incidents in the 2024 data. Thankfully, again, it's hopefully stabilizing. You'll see that in the time series graph. But this, for me, there's an opportunity for an industry. There's two parts. There's the industry-led work around professionalism in following distance, and there's the cross-domain space around light vehicle driving behavior around trucks. That really, there's opportunities here for more work.
So here we're looking at that time series trend of inadequate following distance crashes over this between 2019 and 2024, with inadequate following distance having the second largest rate of human factors incidents. The second most common cause code is not at fault, with 22.2, while inadequate following distance has a rate of 12.8. Inadequate following distance represents 9.2% of all human factors crashes, and it has had an increase of 8.5% from 2023, which is a much more modest increase than previously seen between 2022 and 2023. However, inadequate following distances do remain a growing concern, even though the rate may be stabilising, as no incident cause has less variety in the mechanism and shape of the incidents, with virtually identical crashes playing out more than twice a week in this data set. So 96.9% of all inadequate following distance crashes involved another party, with a DCA code of vehicles from the same direction, which was 96.3% of all inadequate following distance crashes, with a rate of 12.4. Overwhelmingly, inadequate following distance incidents ran into rear crashes. Of the 12.8 per 10,000 trucks run into rear, crashes accounted for 12.4 of those. And this is predominantly an issue in major cities, with major cities representing 80.2% of all inadequate following distance crashes. This is likely due to the increased interaction between trucks and other vehicles. We have a higher rate of rigid trucks, and this is most likely as they operate in these urban and peri-urban environments more often. So for inadequate following distance crashes, this is really about the vehicle's ability to stop in time. That's the most important aspect in order to prevent a crash. And that is a number of factors contribute to that stopping distance, which are vehicle mass, vehicle configuration, the road surface, speed, reaction time, and weather conditions. Stopping distance being a combination of reaction time and braking distance. To put this in context, the average driver takes 1.5 seconds to react in an emergency braking situation. And this equates to a vehicle traveling approximately 42 meters if it was moving at 100 kilometers an hour. So at 100 kilometers an hour, heavy vehicles can require 275 meters to come to a stop in wet conditions, while in contrast, light vehicles require 125 meters. So that means that trucks require up to 2.2 times more distance in order to stop safely. So it's really about the importance of all road users understanding safe following distances and allowing space in front of heavy vehicles. Of note, this has overtaken inappropriate speed to move into the second most frequent cause of human factors crashes. All right. We have some more questions.
Great. Got one here just expanding on a topic. Is inadequate following distances skewed to urban locations?
Yes. Yes. The 80% of them occur in major cities.
Should we expect a reduction in inadequate following distances crashes with greater uptake of technology alerts? Good question.
So the big technology that would be applicable here will be AEB, AEBS, which, depending on who you want to choose, is either advanced emergency braking systems or autonomous emergency braking systems. These are radar or radar and camera-based systems that can detect the risk of an imminent collision, particularly those ran into rear crashes that are the focus of this inadequate following distance space. They can be really highly effective technology. I've got to say the lived experience with the camera-based systems appears to be significantly superior to radar alone systems in terms of false positives. So if you're a fleet buyer, feel free to touch base and can have some chats on that. And they should result in a significant improvement in that space. The challenges are around change management. And unfortunately, we haven't seen that, in my view, adequately considered in the mandate of these technologies, or even the provision without an ADR mandate of these technologies, particularly in the heavy vehicle sector. We just did a lot of work in a project called Breaking Habits with the Australian Livestock and Rural Transporters Association on electronic stability control and rollover crashes. And yeah, the real lesson wasn't really about the technology at all. It was about the humans. And I think there's a real need to far better communicate the technologies and why they're there, have better channels of communication, both upwards and downwards on implementation and challenges and problems. And the other thing I think that we really need to have a good look at, and actually push this in that FAA session that I alluded to earlier, is I think written into the core of all of these ADAS and driver monitoring system technologies and those supportive technologies should be the monitoring of their usage. If you've got one driver that's having 500 AEB events a week, and the average of your population in your fleet is 7 AEB events a week, we should be able to see that. That's something that is an insight in its own right. We shouldn't just be allowing that secondary risk control to become a primary risk control. And that, unfortunately, is way harder than it should be because it wasn't adequately considered in the design and standards writing space.
Just pulling that thread a little bit with a question here from Pete. You may or may not be able to answer this. What's the rate of crashes with heavy vehicles fitted with AEB?
Yeah, this one's a bit of a sore point for me, Pete. So let's have a longer chat offline. The short version is it's too hard to identify which technologies are fitted. We've worked really hard in this data set to get VIN for as many of the units involved in these events as we can, including trailing units that weren't damaged, which is a challenging space for the insurance data set, so that we can do that sort of work, but it has not yet been done. Again, I have a frustration here with how the ADR and the new vehicle standards data is contained and made available. I think there's an opportunity for some really cool research here that simply hasn't been baked into how we designed the system. And that's the key thing here, is that systems level thinking. How do we be a little bit smarter up front so that we can have a much better effectiveness of these technologies in service?
Two questions here, very, very similar. Do these figures account for not at fault cases, such as when a truck maintains inadequate following distances, but a light vehicle cuts in front on the motorway? And another one here from Ted basically saying the same thing. Do you agree that inadequate stopping distances is often caused by a car merging into a truck lane last minute?
Yeah, and I think that's like as well about the ADAS systems we were talking about. They are very effective, but if someone cuts in front of them, the heavy vehicles still require double the distance in order to stop in the braking situation. So that is sort of taken into account. Not at fault incidents. So I think this comes down to
at a coding level, it would. And if we could demonstrate that, but for the car cutting in, the truck would have stopped safely, that would get coded as a not at fault event. Now, this is actually a space, there's a good question in the broker space. Things that would help there, yeah, the fitment rate of dash camera footage. Without dash camera footage, if you have a ran into rear crash, your ability to demonstrate that actually you weren't at fault is near zero. So, working with your client base to have that discussion, but at least forwards and rear view mirror dash cameras help a lot in showing what was your responsibility. And look, things will still happen. You will still have incidents. You will still have claims. That's why you've got insurance. But being able to show those times where actually, no, it was the behavior of those around you. I will flag that if you're driving such that the difference between being able to stop safely and is, say the 7-8 meters of one car length plus its following distance, you're not leaving very much margin to start with. It's very important that we really hammer home those messages around sharing the road safely around heavy vehicles. Again, those following distances are real. There's a lot of mass involved. But yeah, most of these, having watched a lot of dash camera footage of these events, that was not the mechanism we're dealing with here.
Let's move on. I've got a lot of questions for the next section.
All right, inappropriate speed. Now I have to hammer this one. This is a bit like me, and whenever I talk about a heavy vehicle involved, fatal crashes, I always have to say that involved does not mean caused. Whenever I talk about inappropriate speed, I will always call this out. This is not about speed limits. This is not about trucks exceeding the posted speed limit. We will not meaningfully influence this space through enforcement of speed limits. This is about trucks where there's an incompatibility between the geometry of the road, the dynamics of the vehicle plus its load, and the load bit is often significant, and the speed selected by the driver. At times, these events will be happening at less than half the posted speed. But often it's the case that you wouldn't be able to have gotten through the 3 or 4 previous corners in order to crash at the 5th corner had you been going anywhere near the speed limit. And so it's geometrically and physically impossible for the vehicle to be breaching it. This is about the challenging dynamics of heavy vehicles and ensuring we stay inside of their dynamic envelope. So the inappropriate speed incidents have remained stable, and which is nice. They haven't gone up with the rate of other incident types. This is important in that they did feature earlier as the second cause after essentially sleep driving fatigue in those incidents where truck drivers lose their lives. So it's nice to see that trend of reasonably stable rate of inappropriate speed crashes.
So as Adam said, you can see here that inappropriate speed crashes have remained relatively stable, ranging between 12.1 to 13.2 between 2019 and 2024. The proportion of these incidents relative to all major incidents has steadily declined from 13.8% in 2019 down to 8.6% in 2024, indicating stability in this specific risk category. It's largely a single vehicle cause code, so 86.2% of inappropriate speed incidents were single vehicle, and the DCA code with the highest rate was off path on curve, representing 84.2% of all inappropriate speed incidents. It's also highly overrepresented in inner regional areas, outer regional areas, and remote areas. And outcome of these is a rollover event in 60.1% of incidents. So it's can largely be attributed to single vehicle untripped rollovers. Okay. So we did see a 7.6% decrease in inappropriate speed incidents in 2024. This isn't an issue just here in Australia, but it's an issue internationally, and it really is a multifaceted problem. So some of the contributing factors to inappropriate speed incidents are road geometry, road surface, weather conditions, the vehicle mechanical conditions, vehicle combination, the weight of load, and the load geometry. And this is especially highlighted, as Adam said, that recommended speed signage is not tailored for heavy vehicles. And current methods of training, such as printed materials or training workshops, are insufficient for drivers to understand the required, like what the effect that conditions have on their speed selection. So in other research, some recommendations have been made around the use of videos and simulators in order to allow drivers to experience inappropriate speed crashes without consequence. All right. Has anyone got any questions?
Oh, no shortage of questions. Just for a clarification from Leanne, inappropriate speed was down. Is that an actual reduction in rates per 1,000 or a lower percentage overall of causes?
A lower rate. So the rate is adjusted, because the NTI portfolio increases per year, so we adjust for that. So that rate has decreased this year, last year.
Another question just relating to some of the other earlier data at the start from Kev. The latest NHVR data suggests that fatigue offences are rising, but yet the data here suggests that fatigue instances have declined. Are there any thoughts as to why there is such a difference? Adam or Jazz?
Also, we believe that might be a classification. So we classify fatigue as sleep driving. we've emailed NHVR to try and clarify what their classification of fatigue is. That was just the other day, so we haven't heard back yet. But I think, yeah, that will be a really interesting discussion point between our two data sets. But I believe it may be due to how the differences between how fatigue is classified. I don't know if you have anything more to add to that, Adam.
There's enough people in this webinar that have a fairly good sense of this space. The regulation around fatigue is the regulation of a proxy, which is work hours and work hour limits. There are obviously offences around driving whilst impaired due to fatigue, but overwhelmingly what we're talking about is enforcement around that proxy work hours. And what this is likely a reflection is of the strength of that proxy relationship. And that's a challenge with all risk controls, is they tend to be, proxies for eliminating the risk itself, or they tend to have some degree of which they're removed. And that's almost certainly the case here. Personally, I would like to see, and this is just my personal view, I'll cover it, wrong side, sorry. I think it would be beneficial to both sides of the regulatory relationship to have clarity on work hour enforcement and non-conformity to work hour standards as distinct from actual impairment due to fatigue, because conflating the issues just breeds confusion and a lack of clarity.
Thanks, guys. Comment from Dave. Are telematics technology providers held to account in terms of user interface, i.e. not causing further distractions or removing buttons and introducing more on-screen buttons which are harder to engage with while driving? Is there a world where cab of a truck audited in terms of complexity could take place?
A really great question there, and it sort of dovetails also to a question in the chat somewhere on factors contributing to distractions such as UHF radio use and telematics. So it's an emerging space. This is a global issue around task focus while driving and the contribution of technology to loss of task focus. There are standards, the ones I'm most familiar with are out of the US, around how long does it take you to undertake a certain task with your device, and standards around what is an acceptable level of distraction. No, I don't. There is no standards requirement that imposes those tests onto in-cab telematics or other technologies into Australia. We'll touch on it. We might park it till the end. We'll touch on a bit more in the discussion of the UHF use and looking at in-cab distraction.
Yeah, there are guidelines, and sort of research is indicating this move back to more analog systems as well within this is more applied to general road use. A move back from these kind of touch button screen smart device systems inside the cabin back to more analog buttons, just because they provide less distraction. So there's a lot of work in that space as well, which is really interesting, I think.
Last question before we move on from Tia, and I'll combine two here because she put a great one in the chat as well. Is there a rollover that is not related to inappropriate speed? And she also makes a comment in the chat. I've always been frustrated by the fact that there is a focus on rolled while tipping, which is a relatively small problem, instead of rollovers, which is a much larger problem. Is there an opportunity to include rollovers as a type of event along with human factors? Because it seems to be one of our biggest problems in trucking. So really two great points there. It's
the difference between the cause and then the result. So the rollover is the outcome of what the mechanism of the crash. So when we talk about this, we're talking about that mechanism that led to the rollover, rather than the event, like that result itself.
It is a really great point, and I regularly have people conflating or confusing the two issues of in-motion rollovers, which are, again, generally, most commonly, those single vehicle untripped rollovers, versus rolled while tipping events. We do have rollovers that are not inappropriate speed crashes, which are generally inappropriate vehicle positioning events. So You fail to swing adequately wide in your B double and drop your vehicle into a culvert on the inside of the road that falls over. You pull over on the shoulder in wet weather and it sinks into the ground. So you can have a rollover outcome or just ran off road crashes where the vehicle subsequently rolls over. And that there's a language here, and it's a structure I'm exploring on cause versus mechanism versus outcome, where mechanism is probably best fit is starting with that Victorian DCA coding, which I wish all the other states, would have a timeline to align with. Outcomes capturing descriptive outcomes of things like, did the vehicle remain upright, and the causal piece, which is, why did that mechanism chain commence? So largely in this data set, if you're trying to get a feel for, how much of this are those single vehicle untripped rollovers, it's about, something in the 2/3 range of the inappropriate speed crashes have that single vehicle untripped rollover mechanism. So they feature more prominently than inattention and distraction or inappropriate speed. Than inadequate following distance in the fatals data, in the truck occupant fatal. So it's a key topic for keeping our people alive. Tia, if you haven't seen it, the work I mentioned earlier with the ALRTA on smart braking technologies, I think is a really great model and some really great resources in that space. I'll throw an email in the chat dialogue and we can connect, and I'll point you through that material. So I think it's really good stuff because it's about saying not just this is what these technologies are and how they operate. It's about saying this is what they do and why you might want them, why they might be a good thing for you. It's the awareness and desire part of a change journey rather than jumping straight ahead to knowledge and ability.
We'll move on, and I'm going to use that question that Dave's got there as one of our closeout ones as well. It's a great one.
Yeah, so where to from here? And we're very proud of this data. It has become very much a leading source of information to inform the transport industry and those around it on the shape of the harm. We have some challenges on that as well, though. Like, we have some blind spots. So, for example, and Jay's mentioned these earlier, this is property insurance data. So it has blind spots around personal injury. It has blind spots around vulnerable road users, in that if we're only looking at incidents over $50,000, you could have a truck and pedestrian incident that results in a tragedy and a fatality, but doesn't appear in this data set. And so we are exploring those opportunities for better data linkage into things like CTP scheme data and work cover data. It's hard and slow. Very keen for anyone that has good connections in that space to be part of that journey and that discussion, because that's a space that we can present a richer picture of the totality of the challenges that we're trying to manage in road transport with that data than we can without it. The other part is we've got this big human factors element, and there's a risk there that if we just say it's all the driver's fault, that feels blamey. And that doesn't sit right with NTARC, doesn't sit right with me, it doesn't sit right with NEWARC, it doesn't sit right with NRSPP. This is not about blame. This is about saying, where are the opportunities for better support and a better approach? And that nicely takes us to, we just recently announced a new PhD scholarship picking up the driving health nameplate, the work by the wonderful Ross Isles did in his time, and his team around him did at NEWARC, and a fund work looking at those human elements of heavy vehicle road safety. So if you're interested in that space, go and have a look there. I'm really excited I feel in 10 years' time, we'll be looking at this and we'll be saying, this is hand in glove. This is the data on the events. This is how we understood the human factors that contribute towards them and design programs to intervene in that space, which is hugely exciting for us.
And at NTARC, we don't want to just talk about these issues. We also want to contribute to the body of work to address them. So we've got a few different projects at the moment going around addressing some of these key issues. So first one being understanding attitudes towards following distance, where we did a large survey and we'll be publishing results hopefully by the end of the year. We have our Roads projects into steep descents, HVSI into fueling safety, as well as a safer path planning as well as the ALRTA braking habits that Adam's mentioned a couple of times now. So some of these key takeaways from today. We know that the transport industry is operating in a very challenging landscape, but we're really here about understanding, acknowledging, and proactively improving the key hazards that can be managed within the heavy vehicle sector in order to keep all road users safe. NTARC provides a snapshot of performance through safety statistics and trends, and that really is about assisting that understanding and responding to challenges. From the data of the top 3 principal causes, 2 have decreased, those being inattention, distraction, and inappropriate speed. So we're seeing some positive results in the sector as well. And we really want to ensure all road users respect safe following distance in front of trucks, and this needs to be a priority to really reduce those run into rear crashes. And we are here to advocate for research. So trucks are big on the road, but small in research. And we really want to raise the low levels of resourcing of heavy vehicle focused road safety research. And lastly, I'll leave you with, it is important to look beyond fault. So we're not here to blame. We want to focus on how we can support the heavy vehicle sector in order to reduce the key hazards that we've been talking about today. Here we go.
Off time, but there's one last question I was going to close out, and there's one from Steve. We'll circulate later on. So Dave puts a great question in here. As a broker, what is going to help you guys continue to improve the outputs of this report over the years, and also how operators respond to the findings? Great closeout question.
It's good.
It's probably 2 directions. The first one is being tolerant when we're asking at times annoying questions at point of claim. You know, hey, I know that only the prime mover was damaged, but I still want to know the details of the trailers behind it because I'm trying to work out the contribution of, say, EBS to ran into rear crashes. And if I don't know the trailers, I don't know whether the combination had that technology across the units. The second part is being a conduit the other direction, which is when we have these programs and initiatives, whether either being involved up front and being part of the collaborators that make cool stuff like the braking habits work or our dairy safety work before it, or even post-fact saying, hey, I'm your partner in this space. NTI made this thing. This might help you address it, being a distribution channel for those industry-facing resources that we make. The other one I'll call out there is our fantastic relationship with the transport associations. They're another great conduit to get this information out to the industry, because this data on its own and then the initiatives we do off the back of this data only change the world if the people that are in the right jobs see it and have it available to them. But fantastic question. Thanks, Dave.
Great question. So thank you very much for attending today. We had a couple of questions didn't quite get to, so what we'll do is we'll do a bit of a grab on them and circle back. So thank you very much to our audience. Fantastic questions. I think Adam's going to have a tough time working out who's going to take out for coffee. I take my hat off to you on that one. So Jazz, thank you so much for your great work in doing this and today.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming along.
Adam, as always, thanks for geeking out with us today in this great webinar.
Fantastic session. Thank you to all the attendees. Really great engagement. Really makes it emotionally satisfying and makes it feel very worthwhile.
Very good questions. I appreciated it.
Thank you, everyone, to our audience. The webinar is recorded and it will be circulated with a PowerPoint tomorrow. So thank you again and take care. Any questions we missed, just shoot them through. We're very open to feedback if we missed something. So thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.